Good morning and welcome to Climate Matters, your monthly sustainability radio show brought to you by the City of Santa Fe. I'm your host, Neil Denton, and we are on air every fourth Wednesday talking about climate issues in and around Santa Fe. For this month's show, we are talking to two lovely individuals from the City Land Use Department about our Chapter 14 Land Development Code rewrite. I'm joined by Daniel Alvarado. He's a senior planner here at the city, and Maggie Moore, who's the planning manager. Good morning.
Good morning,
Hi.
Neil.
Good
Thank you
morning.
for having us.
Thanks for joining me. I'm excited to learn more about our Land Development Code rewrite and talk to the people of Santa Fe about what's going on. But before we do that, some of the people might not really know what senior planners and planning managers do at the city. So let's start with Maggie. What do you do here at the city?
Thank you. Yeah, that's so funny, Neil. My daughters were just on the cover of the Tumbleweeds magazine, and they were interviewed as part of their, as part of that access. And their first question was, "What does your mom do all day at work?" And so their response was emails, meetings, and tell people what to do. There's a lot of emails, there's a lot of meetings,
Right.
but I think generally, when we think of the land use department, there's a few kind of areas that people might interact with. Current planning, where Daniel and I work, we deal with new development, residential and commercial. But we also answer a lot of questions about zoning and use and, what people can do on their property, how high their fences can be. And, so from the very kind of, small scale, on someone's personal residential lot to very large scale developments that you might see, being built around the city or being approved. And anywhere you see one of those big yellow signs on a property, that's generally our department and what we're working on. So, that's one of the things. But we also, within, land use, we work with historic preservation, which deals with the historic districts downtown and any building and renovations and development that's happening there. Of course, we have building permits. So once you, get your approvals or you want, that's residential housing or large commercial developments all have to go through that. We have the Santa Fe MPO, which does long range transportation planning. And then we have kind of nascent long range planning efforts that are also within the planning and land use that we're trying to staff and work on. And so I think that's kind of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes, I'm the sustainability officer here at the city. And sometimes when I don't feel like unpacking everything that means, I just tell people I'm a city planner.
There you go.
Yeah. Easier because a lot of my work is planning as well. So speaking of city planners, what about you, Daniel? Anything you want to add?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm the one who gets told what to do by my Maggie. Well, only sometimes anyway. No, I split my time between current planning, which is, as Maggie described, we're applying the code or the laws to new developments, building permits, that sort of thing, and evaluating those projects on the basis of the code and approving or denying or making recommendations to the bodies for those approvals. But then I also split my time managing this project we're going to talk about today, which is the Land Development Code update project, which is our kind of nascent long-range planning project. And at the same time, I'm also helping out with our general plan project, which we'll talk about today, which are two kind of the biggest components of long-range planning a city can do. And we're hoping that these projects will really kick off a new phase of long-range planning within the city, and we'll have some staff and people to manage those things in the future.
It's an exciting time to be here at the city with everything you just laid out, the general plan, Chapter 14, all the long-range planning in our water division and so on. There's a lot going on, a lot of impressive stuff. So let's talk about like what is the Land Development Code? What's in there? What kinds of things does it address?
Yeah. I mean, it's Chapter 14. Is another kind of common term that gets thrown around for the Land Development Code. But yeah, it's really a collection of ordinances that have been, adopted and amended, and it is kind of under almost like kind of continual, it's like it is a bit of a living document. Most recently we adopted the, Midtown Master Plan, and we amended portions of Chapter 14, to reflect, the development that is going to take place at Midtown with the Midtown Link text amendment. And so, but so there's a lot there. Open space requirements, setbacks, wall heights, from the nitty gritty to, the procedures for how to rezone your property, or how to, what is in a development plan, and all the different, approval processes that, people will need to, a landowner would need to go through to obtain those types of approvals. So there's a lot there. And I think the main, push that we're undertaking is to kind of have a comprehensive overview of Chapter 14, because it has, received, little amendments and additions over time. But we want to really kind of look at it comprehensively to see how we can bring it, into the and Santa Fe into the 21st century with new planning for the future.
Well, yeah. So this is where you would go in the city code to see what kind of regulations you have to follow if you're building, whether it's a house or a store or whatever. It's going to say where you mentioned setbacks earlier, like where the wall or the fence can be, and
how big your sign can be, how many, we've got, and the parking requirements. And, and so, we are charged with, enforcing these rules. And, it's like, depending on who you're talking to, sometimes, that person is happy you're enforcing those rules, or they're not so happy about it. But yeah, these are all of the items that are really on the table, in the rewrite, and to see,
Right.
What's working, what's not working. Daniel led, right when I started last spring, Daniel was leading our staff in just a line by line read of the code. And so we, kind of went through that process as like an initial effort to try to identify, questions. And, there's one of our senior planners refers to the land development code as an onion. And, as you peel the layers of it, it makes you cry.
Right.
And I think, that is apt.
Because when you change one thing, you have to change something else, because there's, multiple parts of the code are referring to another part.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, and also another important way to look at it is the code is implementing the policies that are set in the general plan, or at least theoretically speaking. And that's why we're looking at updating both of these documents together. They haven't been comprehensively updated for several decades, and they're both actually still quite functional, and you'll find great ideas in there. But there's disconnects between what was some great ideas in 1999 and what's the reality in 2023, and how do we implement those goals in a practical way in today's world.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Yeah. So what we're just trying to bring it up to date with modern society. And what else? What are the other objectives of this endeavor here?
Well, like another thing we should talk about is as part of the code is it's also we're looking at it includes the review and approval procedures, which is not only has all the rules for what can be built and how, it also has all the rules for how things are reviewed and when and by whom. So those are some important components that are part of the code that we're going to be looking at. You wanted to talk about maybe the impetus of why we're doing the code and update and that sort of thing. So there are several reasons why. I mean, like I said, the code and the land development code hasn't been updated comprehensively for several decades. And while it's still very useful, it's missing several. For instance, it doesn't have references to a lot of new uses and new types of development that are coming online. And so while we maybe the code was great for the time when Santa Fe was seeing relatively little growth, we're seeing a lot of growth now, and We want to, as a city, proactively plan for that growth and have code that's actually responsive to the applications that we're getting, and the kind of growth pressure that we're seeing, rather than retroactively responding to each development in a one-off way, trying to fit it into an older plan.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That
And
makes
I
sense.
think that, we have 3 phases of the code rewrite for Chapter 14. And the first one is kind of, we call it like low hanging fruit, or, we're kind of trying to make the code more user friendly, add some diagrams and more pictures. We have, very few diagrams. And I think for, the lay people and, just residents, having those, resources in the code will help, communicate what the requirements are, instead of just reading legal text, or code text. I also think, we're going to do quite a bit of just reorganization of the code. There's a lot of circular references or, cross references in the code that need to be cleaned up. And so that first phase, while it just kind of talks about housekeeping, I think is going to make, the current code and kind of lay the organizational framework for the more substantial updates that we implement in later phases. So it's going to be in that one, I think, what are we looking at, like 18 months for the first phase?
Yeah, so we just kicked off the first phase, and as Maggie said, there's going to be 3 phases to this project, which is kind of a unique way to structure a code rewrite. But we've been told by our consultants anyway that they really like this approach, because it allows us to focus on the non-substantive, as we're calling it, changes first, and get those out of the way ahead of time, and set a clean foundation upon which we can build some great new codes and standards. So, like I said, we just kicked off our first phase with our kickoff week last week. Our consultant team was here in town. We had them. We conducted interviews with dozens of city staff, all the city leadership, people, different organizations from around town. And then we did have planned a public open house in person. Unfortunately, got snowed out on Wednesday when the city shut down. We ended up having a virtual open house instead, which we can talk about that later. But yeah, that was our big kickoff. And now our consultants are working with our staff to compile a big list of issues with the code, both substantive and non-substantive, that they can kind of organize and bring back to us and say, this is what you said, this is what needs to be addressed. And then the next step is actually start hammering away at reorganizing the code and making it integrating those comments.
I'm really glad to hear the effort with the diagrams and everything you mentioned, Maggie, for it to become more user friendly. It can be very overwhelming for anyone to digest city code. So
yeah,
I'm sure that'll be welcomed by everyone who has to crack open that chapter and take a look.
I know I'll feel better when I'm referring people to it. We'll go look at the code, and confident that they'll actually be able to access information in a more organized and digestible manner. So
yeah, and we want to take advantage of modern technology too. I mean, up until a few years ago, most people used a big code book that was this thick and sat on a desk. Now everybody's online, and we want to use as much interactivity as possible to make the code user friendly for everybody, from a mom and pop trying to do a home edition to the biggest developer. Mm-hmm. But yeah, this first phase is going to take 18 months, which sounds like a lot, but it really is going to digest a lot of information up top of everything, both substantive and non-substantive, that will then go into phase 2, which is what we're calling promoting key standards. And that's when we get into the meatier stuff of the substantive edits. These are going to include things like review and approval procedures, land use regulations, zoning districts. So amending zoning districts, adding new ones, adding new design standards. These kind of things are on the table as part of phase 2. And this really is an ambitious amount of opportunities to take on. We have a lot of stuff on the table. But we have a long way to go still.
Yeah.
And then
phase 3. real quick?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Maggie.
Round it out. No,
Just
but
so people know
so
the
yeah,
full
phase
picture.
3 is going to kind of interact or intersect with the general plan update, which is also we're embarking on now. With the code rewrite, we've got our consultant, we've got that set. With the general plan, we're just getting our resolutions ready and our RFP drafted to go out and seek, support for that project, which will intersect with the code rewrite in phase 3, where we adopt a new code and a new general plan. So yeah.
It's a big endeavor. Got some
Yeah.
many years of work cut out for you.
Mhm.
All of us there. I'm excited about the opportunity to incorporate the relevant provisions from our sustainability plan into the general plan. Things that are related to transit-oriented development, affordable housing,
Parking.
parking, yeah.
Parking
So
requirements. Yeah.
let's talk about housing real quick. But before we get into that, anyone tuning in, I want to let you know you're listening to Climate Matters. This is your monthly sustainability radio show brought to you by the City of Santa Fe. And we are talking about the Santa Fe Land Development Code rewrite. I'm joined by a couple folks from our land use department, Maggie Moore and Daniel Alvarado. So we were talking about zoning a minute ago, and I know, in Santa Fe here, we've got a lot of single family housing and burgeoning multifamily housing, but we don't have a lot of what we call the missing middle. It's kind of duplexes, fourplexes, things like that. Is this an opportunity to increase that type of housing in Santa Fe?
Definitely. When I talk about missing middle to folks in Santa Fe, I like to use the example of, if you go around parts of downtown or in the central older parts of the city, you see a lot of it already. It's these cluster homes, the compounds, as we call them here, where we have 10, sometimes more units per acre within a walled compound. And this is the kind of housing that was legal or just was created organically or incrementally before modern, and in the modern sense, I mean mid-century modern zoning laws took hold and really enforced this move towards single-family homes, automobile-driven communities that and often outlawed these missing middle home typologies that we talk about. So in most of the city, you'll find that duplexes, triplexes, small multifamily homes that, from the outside look like a single family home will fit just fine in the character of a neighborhood, but actually have 3, 4, maybe 8 units inside of them are illegal because of our zoning code. And this is the kind of what some might call gentle density or so to speak, that we can use to incrementally increase the housing supply without overwhelming certain neighborhoods with really, really large apartment complexes, which is how our zoning code is laid out now. We either have our single family or we have our big multifamily, and there's not a lot in between.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's certainly exciting. Anything that leads to more available and affordable housing and makes it easier to use our existing built environment.
Right.
I think that's going to be an improvement.
And you probably want to tie it to climate, of course. And while housing is important in its own right, but dense housing, anytime we can do infill rather than greenfield development, especially preventing the kind of suburban sprawl that we might see in other cities nearby Santa Fe, not naming names, that helps preserve the environment. It almost always uses less water in these kind of developments. So in that sense, these missing middle housing typologies are definitely a climate smart approach to housing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And we're, through our, public engagement process, and as we kind of get through phase 1 into phase 2, we're hoping to, implement some, exercises where, we interact with the public and say, okay, well, if Santa Fe is going to grow by this much, in the next 20 years, where are these people going to live? Where are they going to work? And really start to have those, discussions about, well, if we did this, what would that look like? If we did more missing middle, if we had this, code change that allowed for, this incremental densification, of R1 or R2 or R3 lots, to add more housing, what would that look like? Or if we, accommodated it through large multifamily, where would that go? So I think these are the conversations we hope to start having, with the public, because we don't have, we don't have endless land, in Santa Fe, and we don't have endless resources. And so it's interesting. I know also you'd mentioned, Neil, the water department. I know they're working on their, latest water plan, and they've been really, looking to land use and, looking at typologies of water use for different residential types and different residential uses. So, I think they're aware of how important land use is to water use and how they're tied together. The MPO, has been looking at complete streets and how we can improve, active transportation connectivity, throughout the city, connecting to our trail system, connecting to public transit, ensuring that, wherever we are, building homes and people, that they have access to alternative means of transportation other than the single occupancy vehicle. So just a few thoughts too.
Yeah, our city council recently approved our multimodal transition plan. Maggie just mentioned complete streets. Anyone who doesn't know that term, it's making it so all modes of transport can travel around our streets: foot, bicycle, car, and potentially equestrian, right?
Sure, yeah.
Well, I always say bring back donkeys in Santa Fe. I mean, if it's safe to ride a donkey, then it's safe to ride a bike. It's probably safe to walk. Like, that's the kind of safety we need in Santa Fe.
There you go. Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
a good point. Yeah.
Add it to the list, Daniel.
Legalize donkeys.
So you've been mentioning you want people to engage in this process and provide feedback. For everyone listening, how should they do that?
Yes, our website. Yes, please.
So our website is SantaFeLDCupdate.org, SantaFeLDCupdate.org. Sorry if I said that fast. It has, a quick outline of what the project is going to do, and then it has linked to our first survey, which is up now, and then a link to the current code, and we'll be updating the website with much more resources and information as the project goes on. Mm-hmm. And then the other big thing is to come to our open house, which we are rescheduling an in-person open house for mid-March. We don't have an exact date quite yet, but stay tuned.
We'll have that on the website when we
exactly
set that up.
Yeah, you all got hit with that serious snow last week.
Snow again. I mean, I kind of want it to snow again, but I also
just snow on another day, or not in a way that makes it hard to get there. But you still did it on Zoom this last Wednesday.
We did. Yeah, we did. We kind of pivoted, and I think that was one of the lessons for the pandemic, right? As well, let's just do it online if we can't do it in person. So we quickly kind of pivoted to an online meeting, and we had a lot of staff present, but we probably had at least 70 members of the public, attend, which I think was great. And we heard, concerns, kind of some process concerns, and we're looking at, how to do, better and more consistent public engagement and neighborhood engagement, through these processes. Right now, we rely on our early neighborhood notification meeting, which I think everyone agrees is kind of insufficient to really handle the amount of public, engagement and, thirst for public comment on these projects. And so we're looking at that process and how we can better improve that. I think when we, kind of lost long range planning staff, it's really hurt our outreach efforts
right.
to neighborhoods and stuff like that. So, trying to fill those gaps and see how we can, accommodate, the public's desire to participate in this process, and then match it with our capacity, to handle, all of these, kind of competing interests at the city. I think we heard some comments about short-term rentals, and concerns about, how that is even though we do have a short-term rental ordinance, but there were still some concerns raised about that. What else, Daniel, did we hear from folks?
There's a constant drumbeat of, we're in affordable housing crisis, and what are we going to do about it? Which is great, except, it does, when the rubber meets the road, there's often disagreements about how that is going to be solved. So, I mean, this is a perennial discussion in any community.
Right.
But I think what we want to get out of both the code update and the general plan update is really have a public process where we, take a wholesale look at these issues at a citywide scale, and hear from as diverse an audience as possible, economically, ethnically, everybody we need to hear from, and talk about what are the solutions and how, and what is the equitable way to manage these problems. And then hopefully through this process, we can come up with a code and a general plan that, meets, a consensus of people's goals and needs. And then we don't have to come back and litigate every single land use case,
Right.
Which unfortunately, neighbors hear about these projects, and it's hard to change them when they are meeting the code, they're meeting the general plan. The city is in some ways, it doesn't have a lot of room to change their plans once things are already set in the law. So this is our opportunity to make those good regulations that are ensured high quality development, livable communities, connected communities, equitable communities. These things that we all value, but we need to actually plan for in a long range way.
Yeah, very well put, Daniel. So in case you missed it, let's say that website again. One thing I want to add about the website is you can sign up for email updates there. Make sure you're,
That's right.
in the open house, and there's a survey. Is that survey live right now for people to submit?
Yes, it's live. It's live currently, and we will be offering as much of our content in Spanish as well as English. So that should be available as well. So it's Santa Fe LDC update.org.
All right. So yeah, make sure you remember the .org, not the .com. And you can also go to the City of Santa Fe Land Use Department website and find it, right? I haven't double checked that, but I think I got there through your department website.
It should be linked.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Santa Fe LDC update.org. Yeah.
That's right. And there will be, we'll also be reaching out through other channels, city mailing lists, social media. We hope that this process can also be a kind of a public education process, and this is a great start of really sharing what what the LC does, Land Development Code does, and how it affects you at a personal life level.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the way that we're growing as a city, this is one of the most impactful things that we can look at when it comes to fighting climate change. Where people are living, the affordability of that living, how people are getting around. Ultimately, when it comes to the sustainability work that we do here at the city, it's not just to fight climate change or reduce impacts, but to make sure we're in a thriving, sustainable city for perpetuity. That thriving part sometimes gets lost in conversations because we're reacting to things like pollution or inequity, but ultimately we want this to be or for it to continue being a vibrant, thriving place. So this is one of the biggest things we can do to help achieve the goals of the governing body and the people of Santa Fe. So thanks for joining me for this last half hour talking about this. This has been Climate Matters, the City of Santa Fe Sustainability Radio Show. We're going to be on air again on March 22nd. We air every fourth Wednesday, 8:30 a.m. to 9 a.m. And you can always find recordings of our show on YouTube and on the city's website. So,
well, Neil, I hope you have us back when we have, in several months when we've got some more information to share. So
definitely, you're always welcome as a guest. Like I said, this is one of the most impactful things for climate change. So keep tuning in to Suave Radio to stay tuned with what we're up to with our land development code rewrite. Daniel, Maggie, thanks so much for joining me, and I hope you have a great day. Good luck with everything.
Neil, yeah, talk to you soon.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.